I want to point out that when I talk about things related to God that can have positive influences on your wealth, particularly your financial wealth, I am by no means saying that should be the reason that we do those things. I'm not over here preaching prosperity gospel or making money the idol, but I do believe in something called cause and effect. Alex Hormozy, Ed Milet, Tim Ferriss, right? Bunch of big time names that are just really smart, incredible human beings. Andy Huberman, right? You know, just think of your favorite podcast. Think of how much we pursue them. We read their books, we follow them on Instagram, we listen to their content, we listen to their podcasts, we watch their YouTube videos, right? Imagine if we put the same diligence and intentionality into building a relationship and seeking God. Until you strongly believe that you need God in everything, you don't fully follow Him. The only time where money goes bad is when we idolize it, right? When we put it above God. Right? And the problem there is you can only idolize one thing at a time. So if you're idolizing money, guess who you're not leaving room for? God. Hi, I'm Justin Buonamo, and this is Wisdom is Wealth. Wisdom is Wealth is designed to give you guys practical insights, modern strategies, and even timeless philosophies around gaining wisdom in your life. The wiser we get, the wealthier we will become. This podcast really is inspired by the book of Proverbs in the Bible, which was written by King Solomon, who prayed to God for wisdom, and as a byproduct became the wealthiest person to ever live. If he was still alive today in present day, he'd be worth $1.3 trillion with a T. Not because he prayed for wealth, but he prayed to God to give him wisdom. And as he grew wiser, as a byproduct, he grew wealthier, particularly financially, but not just stopping there, in every facet of his life. And in my own life, I have realized that the wealthier I become, it's truthfully just because I have become wiser in life. I'm gonna bring on guests that are incredibly successful, incredibly amazing human beings, and have an amazing financial wealth that they've grown for themselves, and they're gonna share wisdom on their life experience in totality in hopes that something becomes valuable for you to implement in your process, in your life, and in your journey, and see how wisdom truthfully is wealth. Welcome back to another episode of Wisdom is Wealth. And so today we're going to talk about building a relationship between you and God. And in my opinion, probably the most important relationship that you can build. At times complicated, confusing, and today I hope to provide some clarity on particularly how we can play our role to the best of our ability in the relationship with God. And trust me, I'm still figuring this thing out. I've nowhere near figured out this beautiful dance of surrender and self-reliance, or free will, right? And surrendering to God to let Him play His part. And so today let's talk about our role where we can have proper self-reliance, which is, getting up and taking action and playing our part, but not going too far to where we think that we're fully in control and start to play God instead of allowing God to be God. And so I think that the healthy dance between surrender and self-reliance looks like letting God, being faithful that God is God and let Him play His part, but also not using that as an excuse to be lazy. Like, oh God, take the wheel, do everything for me. Like, what are we being called to step up and take action with to provide that perfect partnership with God? And so let's go through this first. Like, what does that role look like? And here's some wisdom, right, that I've learned over the years to basically figure out. Right, I almost just said master, but I'm nowhere near mastering it, but attempting to master the dance of me surrendering while also utilizing my free will to the best of my ability to, have the best relationship I possibly can with God. Because if you do, every other area of your life massively benefits. And then at the end, we'll tie it in a little bit about how can this be related to finances and wealth, whether that's financially or in other areas of your life. But one thing I do want to point out, though, especially early on in these newer episodes of Wisdom is Wealth, I want to point out that when I talk about things related to God that can have positive influences on your wealth, particularly your financial wealth, I am by no means saying that should be the reason that we do those things. Right? I am not saying that grow closer to God so we can become rich, right? Like we want to grow close to God for reasons that we truthfully believe are in our best interest, that we believe that God is who He says He is, that He has the best plan for our life, and that we truthfully know that giving our life to God and following God, right, is just the right thing to do. But at the same time, it's also okay to understand that sometimes blessings do follow obedience. And I'm saying that two things can be true here at once. That yes, it can be true that you're following God, right, for all of the right reasons. And it's also true that usually when that happens, when you have a life rooted in God, you start to grow in characteristics similar to Jesus Christ, and you treat people in this world and yourself the right way, that, usually you'll attract some better results and some things. Yeah. And sometimes that is financially related, where when you are deeply rooted in God, right, and you are a godly human being and you have good characters and good morals and good ethic and good energy and good intentions, right, you usually attract better outcomes in life. And if something in your life is related to making money, then that is just an outcome of something that you're involved in, and it also is going to benefit from this growing, deepening, genuine, authentic, and purposeful relationship that you're building with God. Simply put, right, like your money can get better as you become closer to God, because you become a better human being who attracts better outcomes. Good things happen to good people, right? So I wanted to provide that clarity. Please keep that in mind as we are going through, these episodes and a lot of the wisdom that I'm going to share and the guests that I'm going to bring on. But today you're just stuck with me alone, but that's okay, because I got obviously a lot to share, as you can see already, right? I'm not over here preaching prosperity gospel or making money the idol, but I do believe in something called cause and effect. Right, and what I mean by that is if we become better human beings, and a lot of times that's accomplished by growing closer to God, right? And when we become wiser, we grow closer to God, because wisdom is just understanding what God is asking us to do in our life and going out and acting on it, right? It's just cause and effect that we most likely will significantly increase the chances of our finances getting better, right? Again, good things happen to good people, right? Or you attract what you are or who you are, right? And so I digress, right? But I just wanted to make that clear, and I hope all that makes sense. And so diving into part one for today, it's like, part one? This man hasn't gotten started yet? Nope, here we go. Part one for today is like understanding our role in relationship with God. Like, how do we play that role without doing too little or too much? And for one, it's a dance. You're probably never going to get it perfect, right? You got to show yourself some grace in this process. Transformation doesn't happen overnight, and this role in this particular relationship can be fairly complicated at times. And so some things that have helped me: number one, understanding free will. The note that I wrote down says God gave us the gift of free will, allowing us to choose whether or not to seek him, right? And even out whether or not to seek him, we don't have to we don't have to actively seek him in every single one of our decisions by you're doing nothing else but just like looking for information from God, praying to him, spending time in your Bible. I mean, that'd be great if we could do that all day long, but more so you can seek him indirectly by just making sure that the actions and the thoughts that you're having and the actions that you're taking align with what he wants for your life. And so free will being in every minute, in every moment, in every decision, right? Or in every instance, you have a decision, right? You could do this or that, right? And so we want to make sure whatever we're picking, whatever decision that we are capitalizing on with our free will that God gives us, that it's bringing us closer to him and not further away, right? And so, for example, free will here, God wasn't going to show up and shoot this podcast episode for me, right? I've got some notes in front of me, and I've wanted to prep fairly well so I can make sure that I get this wisdom and get this message across to y'all in a way that actually lands a way that God wants me to have it land, right? And that takes work, right? That takes some work. That's my free will. Or I could have just showed up, and don't get me wrong, it's not a terrible podcast strategy to speak just straight from the heart and speak authentically, like not knocking anybody, but to me, if I would have done that today, that would have been laziness. That would have been doing too little, right? And so point being is God gives us that free will. Ask yourselves, in every belief that you carry, thought that you think, and action that you make, is this bringing me closer to God or further away? God can give you the insights and the direction and the intuition and the sense to go and try to do good things, but ultimately it's up to you to act on that. And so I heard a pastor a couple of weeks ago called it, God gives us final cut, right? Like understanding like the entertainment industry, right? There's final cut. Right, like God can give you the download, but you get final cut. Like, are you going to implement it or not? How are you acting on that? Right, is it bringing you closer to God or further away? So, free will. Right. The other thing is diligence in seeking God. So the note that I wrote down for this one says, building a relationship with God requires intentional effort, just like any meaningful relationship. And so it's funny how I heard this or digested it or understood it and explained it to a couple of people is there's some people in the online space, right? Alex Hormozy, Ed Milet, Tim Ferriss, right? Bunch of big time names that are just really smart, incredible human beings. Andy Huberman, right? You know, just think of your favorite podcast, right? Think of how much we pursue them, right? We read their books, we follow them on Instagram, we listen to their content, we listen to their podcasts, we watch their YouTube videos, right? Imagine if we put the same diligence and intentionality into building a relationship and seeking God, right? That's the diligence, right? Being diligent in building a relationship with Him bears fruits. So, next thing here is choosing godly wisdom over temptation, right? The note that I wrote down for this one says, life presents a constant choice. Pursue godly wisdom or be lured by the temptations of foolishness. And so, godly wisdom is understanding what leads to death and what leads to life, right? And temptation, luring us towards sin, definitely leads to death. And so in the book of Proverbs, it talks a lot about what the difference is, of the lives, the outcomes of the lives of people, of what the righteous life looks like compared to people that give in to temptation, sin, and don't give their life to God. Right? The outcomes of their lives are drastically different, right? And it's not to say that the righteous have a perfect life, right? But they don't sign themselves up for a whole bunch of unnecessary stress and anxiety, missed opportunities, tension, problems, anger, foolishness, adversity, simply because they're just resisting what God has for their life by going against what He's asking of them, right? By giving in to temptation. And don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying that I don't give in to temptation from time to time. And I've definitely had my struggles, topic for a different episode, of giving into temptations in the past, right? So I'm not sitting here all high and mighty, but in every moment, right, you know, we have a choice: give in to temptation, or just, what I like to say, stay alive for that moment, stay alive for that decision, right? Just like if you've ever been on a sobriety journey before, it just says, just stay sober one moment at a time, one day at a time. So stay away from temptation, one temptation at a time, right? And worry about the next one when it pops up, right? And as you grow closer to God, the beautiful part is the temptations don't go away in totality, but I believe they do decrease in frequency, and also we build a skill set of getting away from them and avoiding them a lot. We build a skill set over time, and we get a lot better at getting away from them and avoiding them, and steering towards a more positive path. And so that's number 3. Number 4, one of the things I struggle with the most is full surrender. Right? Full being the key word. Not like, God, I trust you with these things, but I'm going to hang on to these. I trust you with these things, but not these things. Right? So full surrender and not playing God. So the note that I wrote for that one is, true faith means letting go of the need to control everything and trusting God's plan. I'm preaching to the choir here, like when I'm saying, like, I'm talking to myself, because this is probably one of the ones I struggle with the most, but like, no matter how much we try to convince ourselves that we're in control, we're just not. Right? We are just not in control. Think about how large this world is, right? And how many things are constantly going on that is just completely out of our control, right? And I heard this quote the other day that says, the pathway to your destiny is extremely unpredictable, right? And I'll give you an example, just a real practical, authentic, recent example. And so my wife and I, at the time of shooting this, we are just moving back into our primary residence. It flooded about 10 months ago, and we've been living at a rental property about 15 minutes away from our house. And so we moved back in last week, and it was snowing during the week that we were moving. And so our driveway is a little bit of a hill, right? It's tiny. It's not a crazy long hill, but it's steep and it's big enough, right? And when you get to the bottom, it flattens out a little bit, but only a little bit. And after that little bit, right, it like falls off, not a crazy little cliff, maybe like a foot or two drop, but then you just roll right into woods, right? And since we're getting the house renovated, the majority of the landing pad, it has a big dumpster out there for all of the garbage and debris from the renovations. And so anyways, it was snowing, there was snow on the driveway, and my wife, she drives a Range Rover, and before like a rapper bought the Range Rovers, like back in like the early 2000s, and you know, like famous people bought them, put some nice rims on them, and then they became like these boutique vehicles. They were designed to like scale mountains. It's like they're off-roading vehicles by trade, and trust me, we didn't buy it for that. We bought it for the bouginess, so not judging anybody here, but point being is they're supposed to drive good in the snow. I'm like, oh, we're in a Range Rover. I'm gonna put it on snow control. We're good. We get halfway down the driveway, and mind you, we're not going that fast, like we're like maybe 2-3 miles per hour, but I couldn't stop the vehicle. And we're just slipping down the driveway. And I had two choices: run it into the trash can, right? Or take it over the cliff, and hopefully that stopped the car and didn't make as much damage as this big, massive metal trash can that we would have ran into. Or option 3, fully surrender and let God take control. Literally, God take the wheel, right? And we got, thankfully, to the bottom of the hill, and the car stopped well before the ledge, and everyone was safe and fine, right? But for those split couple of seconds right there, right, you just really realize that you are not in control. You're not in control. Right? And even what led us up to moving out in the first place, a pipe burst which flooded the entire house. It's like 3 days after we brought our newborn home, 10 months or so ago. And like that right there will show you just not in control, right? And so fully surrendering, just understanding God's in control, just worry about what is in front of you, right? What are the things that you can influence, and what are the things that you can control and that you're being called to control, and what things you need to surrender to God to allow him to figure out. This is the hardest bullet that we're going to go over, at least in my opinion, right? It takes time, it takes practice, but that's what wisdom is hearing information and going out and implementing it, right? And learning by doing, learning by executing. That's wisdom. All right, number 5. Balance between surrender and self-reliance. I started off the episode talking about this, right? I've been pondering this question for a little bit over a year now. I went on a hike a year or so ago in Idlewild, California with my mentor, Jake Hoffman, and he gave me this question to ponder for the 6-hour hike. What does the healthy balance of surrender and self-reliance look like when it comes to your life, your business, and your finances? Right? And the note that I wrote is faith doesn't mean passivity, right? It's about finding a healthy balance between relying on God and taking action, right? And so when we say we're surrendering to God, it doesn't mean we're just sitting on the couch eating Cheetos all day, hoping God's just going to drop $1 million on our front doorstep and take care of every other facet of our life. We've got to play our part, right? I love the quote that says, God helps those who help themselves. And so speaking of, last thing here, the realization of total dependence on God. Until you understand your need for God in every aspect of your life, you'll never fully follow him, right? Or the way I would say it a little bit differently is like, until you strongly believe that you need God in everything, you don't fully follow him, right? You'll never fully experience God until you realize you need him in everything. And for me, historically, I know that I needed God in things, but when it came to my finances and my business, I'm like, nah, God, I got this, right? Which was not true, right? I need him in everything, right? And so just to give you a little bit of a practical example there. And so it's one thing to believe in God. It's another thing to fully give your life over to him. And so until you understand, the realization of total dependence on God, you're not fully giving your life over to him. And I'll give you an example, and this struck me hard. I heard a couple of months ago now, it was like, it really doesn't even mean anything to believe in God, because if you think about it, the devil believes in God, right? The devil believes that God is who he says he is. Because if he didn't, he wouldn't be working so hard to keep us from God's plan, right? So like, cool, you believe in God, so does the devil, right? Think about that, right? But do you follow God, right? Have you given your life fully over to God? Right? And I think that comes with when you fully surrender and understand that total dependence on God. And so I'm still working through these things on my own, right? I'm not over here saying that I'm amazing at all of these things, but what I have realized, right, the wisdom that I've gained over this past year is it is an incredible venture and extremely profitable in so many different ways, particularly spiritually, right? To start to conduct, I was going to say conduct research. That sounds crazy, but conduct research and go out and implement some of these things that you're hearing to ultimately help you build a relationship between you and God. And so here's some things that help me do that, right? So to tie it into the financial side of things, right? And again, as I mentioned before, we don't do things in God's name, or we don't pursue God solely because we want financial blessings, right? But again, as I mentioned before, if you're pursuing God for the right reasons and you're leveling up as a human being and becoming a higher quality human being, you're going to show up better in all areas of your life, particularly how you generate money and attract money, and inevitably you're going to make more money, right? And so, or not even just make more money, do better with your money in totality. And so I want to connect this to the money side of things, right? The wealth side of things. And so bear with me through, 3 bullet points here. I've got some awesome notes on it, maybe some recap thoughts, and we'll go from there. All right. So making sure that God is your foundation and not money is extremely important, right? The only time where money goes bad is when we idolize it, right? When we put it above God, right? That's where one of the most misconstrued Bible verses of all time comes into play here, where people are always like, money's the root of all evil. It's like, dude, no, that's not what the Bible verse says. You're missing the most important part, which is the first part of that Bible verse, which is the love of money is the root of all evil. And if you dive into the biblical or the Greek translation of the love and the way that it's used in that particular sentence and phrase, right, it translates to idolize. Right? And the problem there is you can only idolize one thing at a time. So if you're idolizing money, guess who you're not leaving room for? God. That's where it becomes a problem. The simple way of saying that is money's an incredible tool, but a terrible God. Right? And so the note that I wrote was putting God first prevents money from becoming an idol. Instead, it becomes a tool to serve a greater purpose. If you can wrap your head around that and get that one right, you'll be a well-equipped, quality steward, financial steward of your money, God-loving human being, right? Because some people get so conflicted, like, does money make me less spiritual or less of a Christian or less of a God lover? No, the way that you're perceiving it does, maybe, right? Maybe not less Christian, but I think you get what I'm saying, right? So hopefully that helps with that perspective. The second thing here is authenticity and alignment. Right. My note for this one is being rooted in God helps you live authentically, often leading to financial growth as a byproduct of living in alignment with His purpose. I'm going to read that one more time. Being rooted in God helps you live authentically, often leading to financial growth as a byproduct of living in alignment with His purpose. Byproduct. Right? Like not even just financial wealth. Every other area of your life gets wealthier as a byproduct of you walking in alignment with God and actually achieving the authenticity for the purpose that He has over your life. Right? And then the last point here is God's influence on financial decisions. Right? So understand this is super important. The note that I have here is prioritizing God promotes attributes like hard work, ethical behavior, and wise financial choices. While it doesn't guarantee wealth, it provides stability and fulfillment with trusting God to meet your needs, right? And so, simply put, the closer I grow to God, the wiser I become, the better financial decisions that I make, right? The better I steward my money, the better that I manage my money, right? Which I guess is just a synonym here for steward, right? So the better I steward my money, right, is usually a byproduct the closer I grow to God. And when you're a good steward of your money, good things happen to your money. Like you see more of it, you grow more of it, you make more of it, and you give more of it, right? And so those are the 3 bullet points there, right? God is the foundation, not money, right? Authenticity and alignment, and God's influence on financial decisions. When you can understand those, it really does help you grow as a faith-based, ambitious believer who has always felt a little bit of friction, right, between being spiritual and faith-based and a God lover, right? But then this thing, money, like how do we make these both work? And these pieces of wisdom have really truthfully helped me. Money just magnifies your character, right? Right. So if you're growing closer to God and you're a good human being, all it's going to do is just magnify beauty. Right? And so some recap thoughts here, right? Building a relationship with God starts with acknowledging your free will and making the deliberate choice to seek Him diligently, seek Him daily, right? Think about things that you go after diligently, that you work hard after, right? Whether that's fitness, relationships, your business, right? Maybe even the people that you follow, like I alluded to earlier, spending hours a day on those things. Imagine if you spent the same amount of energy, if not more, towards seeking God, right? The outcome of your life would be drastically different. The second recap thought here is true surrender to God means giving up control and balancing trust in Him with responsible action. What is the healthy balance of free will or action or self-reliance and surrender? Ponder that question after this episode. All right? Putting God at the center of your life shifts your perspective on money, transforming it from an idol to a tool. Huge point there. Huge point there. Money is an incredible tool, but a terrible God. Where money goes bad is when we idolize it and put it in front of God or above God. Right? If we can figure out how not to do that, then we can leverage it for the beautiful tool it is to create the best life for you and your family. All right? And then rooting your identity in God allows you to live authentically, leading to financial decisions grounded in wisdom and stability. Right? And so if you seek God, you'll become wiser. Right? You'll make better financial decisions. Right? You'll be a healthier human holistically you don't just attract better outcomes, not even just financially, but in every area of your life. And then lastly, wealth, when aligned with godly principles, is not an end goal, but a resource to support your purpose and serve others. And so, a couple of recap thoughts there. And, to remind you, today's episode was building a relationship between you and God. And I wanted to dive into how can we best play our role in that relationship? Because we know God's ready to show up. That's not the question. Are we faithful enough to let him show up and be God? Right? And so at the end, kind of tied in a little bit to money here, right? So I hope that those correlations and those perspectives made sense. And so I'm beyond grateful that y'all are continuing to follow me on this journey and this next evolution of my podcast into Wisdom is Wealth. And as you can feel through the energy, right, it's a little bit different. Not to say that the energy wasn't great in the Holistic Hustle podcast, but this just feels aligned. This is what God is calling me to do, right? And so I hope that y'all enjoyed this episode and the value that was provided. And so as always, share this, like it, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening on, whatever the show love action is. It's liking, commenting, subscribing, downloading. Please do that, right? And take the extra step of showing the love and spread the wealth, right? By spreading this wisdom, and share this with anybody that you think would benefit from this episode. And so I appreciate y'all. I'm beyond thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you in the next episode of Wisdom is Wealth.